10,000 years. That's how long the Adeptus Custodes have stood vigil over the Golden Throne, never wavering, never questioning. They guard the Emperor's physical form on Terra, while the Grey Knights, from their fortress on Titan, protect an even darker secret. The Imperium believes the Custodes guard the Emperor to keep him alive, to maintain the Astronomicon, to preserve the last remnant of humanity's greatest protector. But what if there's a deeper purpose that only the Grey Knights know? What if the Master of Mankind built into every Space Marine a biological kill switch, and the Grey Knights alone possess the knowledge, locked in the Terminus Decree, that their existence depends on keeping the Creator locked in eternal stasis? The evidence hides in the spaces between official histories, buried in precedents the Imperium refuses to acknowledge. To understand what the Emperor truly intends for his Space Marines, we must first look at what he did to their predecessors. The Thunder Warriors were magnificent, towering giants of augmented flesh and bone, stronger and more ferocious than the Space Marines who would follow. They united Terra under the Emperor's banner, crushing the techno-barbarian warlords and gene cults that had carved the planet into warring kingdoms. Without the Thunder Warriors, there would be no Imperium. They were the Emperor's first true instruments of conquest, and he rewarded their service with systematic extermination. Mount Ararat. The name appears in fragments of recovered history, always redacted, always scrubbed from official records. But we know what happened there. At the end of the Unification Wars, when Terra finally stood united, the Thunder Warriors were gathered under the pretense of celebration. The Custodian Guard, the Emperor's golden shadows, fell upon them without warning. Those who survived the initial massacre fled into the Himalaysian wastes, hunted down one by one until the Thunder Warriors existed only in forbidden archives and whispered legends. The Emperor's justification was never recorded because he never offered one. The Thunder Warriors were unstable, their augmentations degrading, their aggression uncontrollable. They were tools designed for a specific purpose, and when that purpose was fulfilled, they were discarded. Not speculation, historical fact, confirmed by fragments recovered from the Terran archives and the few Thunder Warriors who survived long enough to tell their story before the Imperium's executioners found them. If the Emperor was willing to exterminate his first generation of augmented warriors, why would he treat the second generation any differently? Understanding what the Space Marines represented in the Emperor's grand design answers this question. The Emperor did not create the Space Marines because he loved war. He created them because human civilization had collapsed, because Old Night had scattered humanity across the galaxy, because the only way to reunite mankind was through overwhelming military force. The Primarchs and their legions were instruments of reconquest, nothing more. Every aspect of their design reflects the singular purpose. While the Primarchs were leading the Great Crusade across the stars, the Emperor returned to Terra and locked himself in the dungeons beneath the Imperial Palace, working on the Webway Project. Not leading his armies, not celebrating conquest. Working on a method to free humanity from dependence on warp travel. To create a galaxy-spanning network that would make the navigators obsolete and shield mankind from the predations of chaos. The Webway Project reveals the Emperor's true priorities. He wasn't building an eternal military empire ruled by superhuman warriors. He was building the infrastructure for a peaceful, stable human civilization that wouldn't need warriors at all. Once the Webway was complete, once humanity controlled its own transportation network independent of the warp, the Space Marines would be obsolete. Dangerous relics of a violent age, too powerful to integrate into civilian society, too independent to fully control. The Emperor understood something fundamental about military forces. They exist to serve political ends. Once those ends are achieved, standing armies become threats to the peace they helped create, especially when those armies are composed of post-human warriors who live for centuries, who know nothing but war, who are biologically and psychologically incapable of integrating into normal human society. The Horus Heresy proved exactly how dangerous the Space Marines could become when they turned their weapons against the Imperium itself. Half the legions betrayed him, and even the loyal half presented their own risks. What happens when warriors who can tear through tank armor with their bare hands decide they should rule instead of serve? What happens when the tools refuse to be put away? Every Space Marine is a biological marvel, a fusion of human genetics and the Emperor's own works. But they are not independent beings. They are dependent beings linked through chains of genetic inheritance to their Primarch, and through their Primarch to the Emperor himself. This dependency isn't accidental, it's architectural. The geneseed system ensures that every chapter, every successor, every Space Marine created across 10,000 years carries within them genetic material that traces back to their Primarch. The Primarchs themselves were created from the Emperor's own genetic template, modified and enhanced for specific purposes but fundamentally derived from him. Every Space Marine carries a piece of the Emperor inside them, encoded in their very cells. What if that genetic link is more than just inheritance? What if it's a control mechanism? The Emperor was a geneticist of unparalleled skill. He created the Primarchs from scratch, engineering beings who could each conquer worlds. He designed the geneseed system to propagate their gifts across entire legions. But the Emperor was also pragmatic to the point of ruthlessness. He killed the Thunder Warriors when they were no longer needed. He erased 2 Primarchs from history so thoroughly that even their brothers struggled to remember them. Would such a being create his greatest weapons without failsafe? The Grey Knights hold the answer. They were created in absolute secrecy during the Horus Heresy, formed from selected Space Marines whose loyalty was beyond question, enhanced with technology and knowledge forbidden to other chapters. They answer to no one but the Emperor himself, and on their fortress moon of Titan, they guard the Terminus Decree, a sealed document that reveals the horrifying truth about the Emperor's final contingency. The Custodes don't know this. They guard the physical throne, believing they protect their master, but the Grey Knights understand the deeper truth. They're not protecting the Emperor. They're protecting every Space Marine in the galaxy from what the Emperor would do if he awakened. What if the Emperor encoded into every Primarch's genetic structure a failsafe mechanism, a biological kill switch that he could activate at will? What if every Space Marine, by virtue of their geneseed connection to their Primarch, carries that same vulnerability? And what if the only thing preventing that kill switch from activating is the Emperor's current state of stasis on the Golden Throne? The theory explains so much. Why were the Grey Knights created with such secrecy? Why do they possess knowledge and authority that exceeds even the High Lords of Terra? Why does the Terminus Decree exist at all? Because if the Emperor were to die and regenerate, if his psychic consciousness were to fully reconstitute itself, he would finish what he started with the Thunder Warriors. The Emperor is perpetual. We know this from the histories that speak of his previous deaths and rebirths across the millennia. When he was placed on the Golden Throne after the Horus Heresy, it wasn't to keep him alive in any conventional sense. It was to keep him in stasis, suspended between life and death. His consciousness trapped in a state where he could maintain the Astronomicon but never fully regenerate. The Custodes unknowingly maintain this prison. They believe they preserve their master. They don't understand that their vigil prevents the Emperor from doing what he always intended, removing the Space Marines from the galaxy just as he removed the Thunder Warriors from Terra. Hidden within the deepest vaults of the Grey Knight's fortress on Titan lies the Terminus Decree. For 10,000 years, the sealed order remained one of the Imperium's most closely guarded secrets. Only the Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights knew its contents, and even then it was meant to be opened only in humanity's darkest hour, when all other hope had failed. The decree's contents have now been revealed, and they're chilling. The Emperor must never leave the Golden Throne, even if he seems to revive, even if he appears reborn, even if he begins to ascend to some higher state of being. He must be forced back onto the throne by any means necessary. The Grey Knights are commanded to travel to Terra and use all their power to prevent his departure, even if it means fighting the Adeptus Custodes themselves, the Emperor's own guardians. The decree serves as a last-ditch failsafe against what it describes as a catastrophic fate for humanity. But what catastrophe could be worse than the Emperor leaving the throne? What fate so terrible that his own most loyal servants must be prepared to force him to remain imprisoned? The answer becomes clear through the lens of the kill switch theory. If the Emperor were to leave the throne, if he were to fully regenerate his perpetual body and regain his consciousness, he would complete his original plan. The genetic failsafe encoded in every Space Marine's geneseed would activate. Every chapter across the galaxy would collapse as their enhanced bodies shut down simultaneously. The Imperium would lose its greatest defenders in an instant. The Terminus Decree isn't a contingency plan. It's a prison sentence with no possibility of parole. The Grey Knights must be ready to keep the Emperor trapped in this half-death state because his awakening means their extinction and the extinction of every Space Marine in existence. But there's another layer to this conspiracy, one that reveals the political machinery of the Imperium at its most cynical. The Terminus Decree serves multiple purposes beyond preventing the biological kill switch. Who benefits from keeping the Emperor on the throne? Not the Emperor himself, who suffers an eternal agony. Not the Space Marines who remain perpetually under threat of extinction. Not humanity, which loses the active guidance of its greatest protector. The true beneficiaries are the High Lords of Terra and the Inquisition, the bureaucratic and military elite who rule the Imperium in the Emperor's name. For 10,000 years, these institutions have wielded absolute power across 1,000,000 worlds. They command armies, dictate laws, determine the fate of entire sectors. They do all of this by invoking the Emperor's authority, by claiming to speak for a being who cannot speak for himself, by interpreting the will of a mind trapped between life and death. If the Emperor awakens and leaves the throne fully conscious and fully powerful, he would immediately recognize that the Imperium he envisioned has been twisted into something monstrous. The Imperial truth has been replaced by the Imperial cult. His vision of a secular, rational humanity has become a theocratic nightmare where he is worshipped as a god. The streamlined government he planned has metastasized into a bureaucracy so vast and corrupt that entire worlds can be lost in its records. An awakened emperor would not tolerate this perversion of his vision. He would reclaim direct control. He would dismantle the bloated bureaucracy. He would end the ecclesiarchy and the worship of his own divinity. He would render the entire power structure of the modern Imperium obsolete. The High Lords and the Inquisition cannot allow this to happen. They've spent 10 millennia building their power, creating systems of control that span the galaxy. They rule in the Emperor's name precisely because the Emperor cannot contradict them. An incapacitated God Emperor is the perfect figurehead, powerful enough to legitimize their authority, helpless enough to never challenge it. By framing the Emperor's imprisonment as a protective measure, by describing it as preventing catastrophic fate for humanity, the Terminus Decree provides moral justification for maintaining the status quo. The Grey Knights believe they protect humanity from the kill switch activation. The Custodes believe they protect their master through loyal service. Neither group realizes they're tools in a larger conspiracy to maintain the power structure of the Imperium. The Inquisition and the High Lords may not even know about the biological kill switch. They don't need to. All they need to know is that an awakened Emperor threatens their authority. The Terminus Decree serves both purposes simultaneously. It prevents the Space Marines' extinction, and it prevents the political elite from losing power. 2 conspiracies, 1 decree, and the Emperor remains trapped between them. The Terminus Decree explicitly commands the Grey Knights to be prepared to fight the Adeptus Custodes to keep the Emperor on the throne. This anticipates a crucial conflict. The Custodes would try to help him leave. The Custodian Guard were created to be the Emperor's companions, not his jailers. They're the only warriors in the Imperium who knew him as a person, who fought beside him during the Unification Wars and Great Crusade. Their loyalty is to the Emperor himself, not to the Imperium's institutions or the Space Marine chapters. If the Emperor began to revive, if he showed signs of leaving the throne, the Custodes would naturally try to help him. They would see it as their duty to free their master from his imprisonment. They don't know about the kill switch. They don't understand that the Emperor's freedom means that Space Marines die. They would act out of loyalty and love, triggering the very catastrophe the Grey Knights exist to prevent. The Terminus Decree recognizes that the Custodes and their devotion would become obstacles. The Grey Knights would have to fight and kill the Emperor's own bodyguards to keep him trapped. Warriors sworn to protect the Imperium would slaughter the Emperor's most faithful servants to prevent him from exercising his own will. Picture the scene, the Emperor, after 10,000 years, finally regenerating, the Golden Throne beginning to fail, the Custodes moving to help their master rise, and the Grey Knights teleporting into the throne room, weapons drawn against the Golden Warriors, not because they hate the Custodes, not because they doubt the Emperor, but because they know that if he leaves the throne, every space marine in the galaxy will die. Different factions believe they serve different purposes, but all work towards the same end, keeping the Emperor imprisoned. The Grey Knights hold the Terminus Decree and understand they must prevent the Emperor from leaving the throne. They do this for survival, their own and every space marine's. The High Lords and Inquisition maintain the system to preserve the power structure that has governed the Imperium for 10 millennia. The Adeptus Mechanicus preserves the Golden Throne's sacred machinery, maintaining the device that keeps the Emperor in stasis, unaware that their technical expertise serves both conspiracies. The Custodes guard their master's physical form, standing vigil in the throne room, preventing any external threat from reaching the Emperor. They believe they protect him through loyal service, not realizing they maintain a prison. Most guards don't realize they are guards. Multiple groups with different motivations all work to maintain the same captivity. Even the prisoner's most loyal servants help to keep him trapped. At the center sits the master of mankind, the Emperor of humanity, the greatest being the human race has ever produced, locked in a cage built from the genetic code of his own creations, maintained by the political ambitions of his servants, and guarded by warriors who would let him rise to save him, even if it dooms the very Imperium he created. The Horus Heresy should have destroyed this plan entirely. Half the legions turned traitor, and the Emperor was forced onto the Golden Throne before he could complete the Webway Project. But look at what happened in the immediate aftermath at the decisions made by those who knew the Emperor best. Malcador the Sigillite established the Grey Knights during the Heresy itself, drawing on knowledge given to him directly by the Emperor, not after the Heresy, during it. At the height of the crisis, when the Imperium was burning and every warrior was needed, resources were diverted to create a new chapter to fight demons, but also to serve as guardians of the terrible secrets contained in the Terminus Decree. Guilliman wrote the Codex Astartes, which broke the legions into smaller chapters. The official justification was preventing another heresy by ensuring no single commander could control the military might of a full legion. But there's another explanation. Smaller chapters are easier to eliminate if the need arises. A legion of 100,000 space marines could conquer the galaxy. A chapter of 1,000 is powerful but manageable, especially if they all share the same biological vulnerability. The Emperor's death would have triggered the kill switch immediately, but his placement on the Golden Throne created an unexpected problem. He wasn't dead, he wasn't alive, he was suspended, and in that suspension the kill switch remained dormant. The Grey Knights, given knowledge of this mechanism by the Emperor or Malcador, understood what this meant. As long as the Emperor remained on the throne, the Space Marines would continue to exist. If he died and regenerated, he would complete his original plan. So the system maintains itself. The Custodes guard the throne, believing they protect their master. The Grey Knights hold the Terminus Decree, knowing they must intervene if he tries to leave. Neither group acts from malice but from duty, yet together they ensure the Emperor remains imprisoned. 2 Primarchs are missing from Imperial history, the 2nd and the 11th. Their names have been expunged, their legions dissolved, their very existence scrubbed from records with such thoroughness that even their brother Primarchs hesitate to speak of them. The Imperium claims they never existed, but the gaps in the numbering tells a different story. What happened to them? The answer is lost to time, but the implications are clear. The Emperor could erase Primarchs from existence. He could destroy his own creations when they no longer served his purposes or when they proved defective. The lost Primarchs serve as proof that the Emperor was willing to eliminate even his most powerful sons if necessary. What happened to their Space Marines remains unclear. Some sources hint that the warriors of the Lost Legions were quietly redistributed among the remaining legions, their heraldry changed, their memories suppressed. But the erasure was so complete that even this cannot be confirmed. Either way, the Emperor demonstrated he could unmake what he created. If the Emperor could do this to 2 legions, he could do it to all 20. The precedent was established. All that remained was the right moment to activate it. 10,000 years have passed since the Emperor was entombed on the Golden Throne. The Imperium has rebuilt itself around the cult of his divinity, transforming a rational man who despised religion into a god worshipped across 1,000,000 worlds. The Space Marines have become legendary heroes, the greatest defenders of humanity, their existence justified by endless war against endless enemies. But beneath this mythology, the system continues. The Custodes guard the throne chamber on Terra with dedication that goes beyond faith. The Grey Knights maintain their fortress on Titan, keeping the Terminus Decree in its sealed vault. They possess authority that supersedes normal Imperial hierarchy, answering only to the Emperor himself, and in his absence, to no one at all. Why would the Emperor grant one chapter such absolute authority? Why would he ensure that they had the power to operate outside all other Imperial institutions? Their mission is to maintain the knowledge of what must be done if the Emperor ever tries to leave the throne. The Grey Knights understand that every day the Emperor remains on the throne is another day the Space Marines continue to exist. Any attempt to heal him, to restore him to full consciousness, would trigger the biological's failsafe encoded in every geneseed organ across the galaxy. They are trapped. They must be ready to stop the very being who created them from completing what he intended. How could they speak of this? The revelation would destroy the Imperium's faith in the Emperor. It would shatter the Space Marines' understanding of their own existence. It would reveal that the greatest heroes of humanity were always meant to be temporary, tools to be discarded once their purpose was served, just like the Thunder Warriors before them. When Roboute Guilliman was resurrected and returned to Terra, he stood before the Golden Throne and spoke with his father. What passed between them remains one of the Imperium's most closely guarded secrets. Guilliman emerged from the encounter devastated, his faith in the Emperor shattered, speaking in fragments of disappointment and horror what his father had become. But what if Guilliman's horror came not from seeing his father reduced to the corpse god, but from learning the truth about the Emperor's original plan? What if the master of mankind, even in his current state, made clear to his son that the Space Marines were never meant to be eternal? That they were always tools, weapons forged for a specific purpose to be destroyed when the purpose was fulfilled. Guilliman has since thrown himself into reforming the Imperium with desperate intensity. The Primarchs Marines, the Adeptus Crusade, the political restructuring of Imperial governance. He acts like a man racing against time, trying to accomplish something before an inevitable deadline. If the theory is correct, he knows that deadline exists. He knows that if the Emperor were to die and regenerate, or if the Golden Throne were to finally fail, every Space Marine in the galaxy would die with him. The Primarchs Marines might be Guilliman's attempt to create a new generation of Space Marines free from the Emperor's kill switch. Enhanced geneseed, new organ implantation procedures, biological improvements that go beyond the original design. But even they are built on the foundation of the original Primarch's genetic material. Even they might be subject to the same failsafe. Some may wonder, wouldn't it also destroy all of the Chaos Space Marines? The answer remains unknown. It's not known how their attachment to the Chaos Gods has changed their biology and geneseed fully. It is theoretically possible that the kill switch removed all of the loyalist Space Marines, but leaves the ones who fell to Chaos relatively untouched. This would be beyond catastrophic and potentially the end of the Imperium. Picture being a Grey Knight Supreme Grand Master. You open the Terminus Decree and read its contents. You are a Space Marine, one of humanity's greatest defenders, born into service to the Emperor. You have dedicated your existence to fighting chaos, to protecting humanity from demonic corruption. You've proven your loyalty 1,000 times over, and you learn that your Creator built into your very genes the mechanism of your destruction. You know that if the Emperor leaves the throne, you must stop him, not to preserve him, but to prevent him from awakening and executing his original plan. You must be ready to teleport to Terra, to fight past the Custodian Guard if necessary, to force the Emperor back onto the machinery that keeps him in eternal agony. Any other option means your extinction and the extinction of every Space Marine chapter in the galaxy. You cannot tell anyone. The other chapters would never believe you, or worse, they would believe you and fracture the Imperium in civil war. The High Lords would see you as a threat to their authority. The Inquisition would brand you heretics for suggesting the Emperor intended anything but humanity's eternal salvation. You are alone with this knowledge, guarding a truth that can never be revealed. The Grey Knights are so secretive because of this. They mind-wipe those who learn too much about their operations. They possess authority that supersedes all other Imperial institutions. They're not just demon hunters, they are the keepers of the Emperor's darkest secret, the guardians of a truth so terrible that its revelation would destroy the Imperium as surely as any chaos invasion. If this theory is correct, the entire foundation of the modern Imperium rests on a lie. The Space Marines are not eternal defenders of humanity. They're temporary tools that should have been decommissioned 10,000 years ago. The Emperor is not a protective god watching over his people. He's a prisoner kept in stasis to prevent him from completing his original plan. The Golden Throne is not a sacred relic, it's a cage. Every chapter master who swears loyalty to the Emperor is swearing loyalty to a being who intended to destroy them. Every Space Marine who dies in the Emperor's name is dying to perpetuate a system that was never meant to last. Every citizen who prays to the God Emperor for protection is praying to a man who saw their superhuman defenders as expendable weapons. The Grey Knights maintain the lie because the alternative is worse. Without the Space Marines, the Imperium would collapse. Without the Imperium, humanity would be consumed by its enemies. The Emperor's original plan, the vision of a peaceful, unified humanity no longer dependent on post-human warriors, died with the Horus Heresy. That future is gone. All that remains is the brutal present, where the Space Marines are necessary because the galaxy is too hostile for normal humans to survive without them. So the system perpetuates itself. The Custodes guard the physical throne through loyal service. The Grey Knights hold the Terminus Decree, ready to intervene if he tries to leave. They do this not out of loyalty to him, but out of loyalty to the Imperium that needs the Space Marines to survive. They are trapped by the same pragmatism that drove the Emperor to create them. They are tools that recognize their own utility, choosing to preserve themselves not out of selfishness, but because humanity has no other defenders. And now the final question. What happens when the Golden Throne finally fails? The Mechanicus admits the ancient machinery is degrading beyond their ability to repair. The Emperor's psychic presence is fading. The day will come when the throne can no longer maintain his stasis. Then he will die and potentially regenerate. Will the kill switch activate? Will every Space Marine across the galaxy suddenly collapse, their enhanced bodies shutting down as the genetic failsafe encoded in their very cells completes its function? Will the Imperium watch in horror as its greatest defenders die without warning, leaving humanity defenseless against the encroaching darkness? Or will the Emperor regenerate into something new, awakening from 10,000 years of imprisonment with his original vision intact? Will he look upon the Imperium built in his name, upon the Space Marines who worship him as a god, and finish what he started with the Thunder Warriors? And if he tries to rise from the Golden Throne, will the Grey Knights fulfill their terrible duty as commanded by the Terminus Decree? Will they arrive on Terra, fight past the Custodes who try to help their master, and force the Emperor back into his eternal prison? The Custodes stand their vigil on Terra. The Grey Knights maintain their fortress on Titan, guarding the Terminus Decree. They hold the Emperor's greatest secret because its revelation would destroy the faith that holds the Imperium together. And in the darkness of the throne room, as the Golden Throne's machinery grinds and whirs, keeping the Emperor suspended between life and death, perhaps he dreams of the day when his tools will finally be put away. Perhaps he remembers the Thunder Warriors falling at Mount Ararat, and knows that history must repeat itself. Perhaps he waits, trapped in eternal stasis, for the day when the throne will fail and he can complete what he always intended. The Space Marines are humanity's greatest defenders, but they were never meant to be humanity's eternal guardians. They were weapons forged for a specific purpose, designed with a specific lifespan, created by a pragmatist who understood that military force must eventually give way to civilian rule. The Emperor learned the lesson of the Thunder Warriors. Warriors who outlive their purpose become threats to the peace they helped create. So he built his Space Marines with a kill switch, a biological failsafe that would allow him to remove them when the time came. And when the Horus Heresy derailed his plans, when he was forced onto the Golden Throne before he could complete the Webway Project, that kill switch remained dormant, waiting for the day when its creator would finally activate it. The Terminus Decree makes it clear, the Grey Knights must be ready to keep the Emperor imprisoned, not to preserve him, but to preserve themselves and all their brother Marines. They are the keepers of the Emperor's darkest secret, the guardians of a truth that can never be revealed, the defenders of a system built on lies and necessity. They choose to live, even knowing they were designed to die. They choose to serve even knowing their service was always meant to be temporary. They hold the Terminus Decree even knowing it condemns the Emperor to eternal imprisonment, because the alternative is to let him awaken, and that is a future no Space Marine can accept.